Hey, folks, very excited again to be with Ron Branstner. Let's have him back in the Rochester, Minnesota area again soon, or wherever you would like to host him. Reach out if you want to help bring him to your community to speak about these important issues, which are very important to Minnesotans. And I'm just gonna kind of cut him off the leash here and let Ron go ahead and talk because he has some new amazing information for us about what's happening right now, not just at that border down in Texas, not just out there with Nancy Pelosi in California, not just out there with Chuck Schumer in DC, but what's happening and what is going to happen, what you will see happening in our communities right here in Minnesota. Ron, thank you. Thank you for coming along. What do you have to say today?
Wes, this is an important subject for me because this is what I've been studying for so many years. And most people believe that we're not a border state, even though we border with Canada. So we believe that the borders don't cross here in Canada, which they do. So right now, the biggest hot subject that's happening in America is immigration. In Minnesota, they're probably talking about George Floyd, but in America, they're talking about immigration. And there's a lot of things that people don't understand in Minnesota. They just have no clue. They think that because we're, 12, 13, 14, 1,500 miles away from the border, that the immigration issue doesn't affect us, that
Right.
we are pretty much a European state. The infiltration happened many, many years ago on two different levels. One of them was through 501c3s and foundations like Hormel and the Blandon Foundation and McKnight Foundation. But we also have to look at the other one, which I think is more important, is the infiltration of our Minnesota politics. You start to look at, and I want anybody out there that's watching this, I want you to look at your politics in your city and start looking at seeing who they're electing. They're electing people outside of Minnesota. They're deliberately electing people outside of the state or the country, and they are basically running the state. There are programs that are being run inside these inner cities that people don't even have a clue about. And one of those is the Council of Europe, which is in Rochester. The Council of Europe is out of Europe, for God's sakes. It's the only city in the nation that adopted the Council of Europe, which is, by the way, it is illegal to adopt something that the United States did not adopt, but they adopted it in Rochester. They also adopted the United Nations agreements to the Welcoming Cities resolutions. Now, most people think the Welcoming Cities resolutions, which has to do with immigration, is a feel-good idea. The answer to that is not just feel-good. It comes right out of the Paris Climate Agreement. It comes right out of the Clinton Foundation. It comes out of Habitat 2 out of the United Nations. This is a United Nations government program that people are thinking that it does not affect them, but in fact, it does affect every aspect of their lives. And they're implementing welcoming cities resolutions all throughout the United States. And people think that is, if we're not welcoming, we're not a welcoming city. We're not welcoming all people.
We're
Well, the
not good
truth is,
people.
yeah,
Not good people, evil if we're not welcoming. Yeah.
and so here we got a couple of aspects we're looking at. We're looking at the people that were the dynamics of the governments that were allowing people to run our cities that aren't even from the United States or from the city. A good representation of that is Keith Ellison, Attorney General. He's he's from Michigan.
Yeah.
Elon Omar, Kenya. We look at one of the biggest culprits is Jailani Hussein, Egypt and Somalia. And I could go on with Noor and everybody else that's all from different countries. And they're all infiltrating. Just start to look at your politics and these initiatives that they're passing down in your area, in the Rochester area. You're going to find out that most of these people, I'll give you a fine example. I can't pronounce her name, but she runs the Diversity Inclusive Program, which, by the way, is out of the United Nations. She just got appointed that position in Rochester. She's not from here. She's from Kenya. So these positions are being implemented through the United Nations by directive of these city councils and Agenda 21 to implement them in your cities. And they use your Minnesota Nice against you. And so put that into frameworks now. So I just gave you a layout of some of the dynamics to it. So let's look at, is the border away from Minnesota? No, the answer is no. The southern border is what we're primarily focusing on. The problem with this is just recently, Joe Biden just announced that he wanted to open up the borders and bring these unannounced migrant workers here, undocumented child arrivals, and he wants to fly them to the northern border of Minnesota and drop them off because the facilities don't have enough manpower. So what they're doing now is they're using the northern border to open up, and we're going to start getting an influx of people from the northern border. So is this legal? And I guess that's the question that you have to ask everybody. Is this legal? Well, the answer to that is they got around legality and they used the 2008 sex trafficking laws. You had to be about 12 years or older or younger to be under sex trafficking. The Obama administration extended the sex trafficking to 18 years of age and below. So these 18-year-old boys and girls are falling under that category and being allowed to come in, being called unaccompanied minors. Here's the situation with that. These unaccompanied minors are accompanied by their parents all the way to the border and then dropped off to our National Guard, our Border Patrol agents. They weren't accompanied when they got to the border. They were accompanied as they get to once they crossed the border and they left their parents behind. The issue with that is once they get into the United States, we take care of them as their guardians, and they get transported across state lines, which, by the way, is illegal. Title 8, Section 1824, A, B, and C, 1, 2, and 3 states emphatically that if you knowingly know, and remember these people are still considered illegal. When you knowingly know that they cross state lines into the United States and you harbor them and you transport them under A, B, and C, you are in violation of federal law. So what the Congress did was not only did they allow Biden's administration to bring these people in, they facilitated lawyers and they used federal grant or federal money to lawyer up, transport them across state lines, and then put them into cities without your and I approval. Now, most of these cities don't even know they're doing illegal. They're just dropped off into cities like Hilo Bend in Arizona. They were just dropped off in buses, asking the city to take care of them. That is illegal. The law states you cannot transport across state lines and knowingly know that they're here illegally in the country. So is the Biden...
Can I ask a question, Ron?
Right.
Is it not also illegal to lure people or incentivize or somehow encourage them to come into a city? I'm unclear on that, but there's been some talk about this. Could we create a poverty magnet in Rochester, Minnesota, or some other city where we're encouraging people to come, and that would also be illegal? I'm not sure. I really don't know.
The mere fact that you can advertise on the Mexico border is encouraging people to come to your city. Now we know that after the 1985 strike in Hormel, when they went and as Jerry Anfinson, treasurer of Hormel, stated to Pat Ray, he stated that, which is the executive of Hormel, stated that cheap labor doesn't come to us, we're going to it. And they went down to the border and they started soliciting out of several of the towns, and they emptied some towns out down in Mexico to bring them up to Austin, Minnesota. That's really what started this barrage of immigration in Minnesota. They were the open door. They were the corridor to Minnesota's illegal immigration and the Midwest immigration back in the early 2000s, actually in the 1990s. So you've seen this, and then the foundations got on board, and they facilitated harboring and transporting them, as you say, enticing them to come. It used to, as they stated in one of the articles that I wrote, it was called a soft landing. That was the name of the article. And it said first the men came one by one, and then after that the families started to follow. So they were enticing the men to come first. Now in this day and age, they're enticing the children to come first because they're doing it as a humanitarian act. So they're bypassing, basically bypassing law and using humanitarianism to facilitate their agenda. They're working on people's emotions instead of the actual raw facts of how the Constitution works. The Constitution states, Article 6, that the Constitution is the law of the land, the supreme law of the land. And within those laws, you have below that is states' rights. If those two have any confrontation with each other, the supreme law of the land overrules states' rights. What the states are doing is they're saying we have states' rights, which is the 10th Amendment, and we can have what we call sanctuary city policies. Now, we know that we have sanctuary city policies in St. Paul and Minneapolis. By having sanctuary city policies, you are basically harboring illegal aliens. And
I
you are
would add to that, there's some churches here in inverted quotes, churches which are participating in the harboring, and they call it sanctuary churches, one of which is, of course, and I'll say this is all on me, Mayor Kim Norton's Unitarian Universalist Church, Pastor Luke. They voted to become a sanctuary for illegals. And I would only say that it's concerning that someone coming out of that political environment where they have many groups that they regularly host inside their church, and then that person becomes mayor. So it creates an environment where ICE is not cooperating with the police department, or ICE might not be invited to cooperate with the sheriff's department if someone's being released, whom they know ought to be picked up by ICE. There could be some issues there. I'm just saying that for my own part. But yeah, sanctuary cities are nonsense. They're against our Constitution, and they violate the rights of the people. They violate the rights of home rule. And we should be supervising our own elected officials and our own governmental entities here. We shouldn't have people from outside the United States of America coming to Rochester, Minnesota in the form of supervisors from the Council of Europe, whatever the heck that means, whereas the EU is falling apart. And Ron, could I pass the torch back to you there, the talking stick, so to speak?
You said a couple of things there. So, okay, I'm just going to take the latest one first because that's important. Because you bring up the Council of Europe. Most people don't understand what the Council of Europe is. It's a group of nations that got together and followed the 1951 and 1948 protocols of the United Nations Human Rights Commission. The United States never adopted the Human Rights Commission fully, and the Council of Europe adopted that fully at the international level. Problem with that is these ideas that Mayor Norton is pushing is United Nations Human Rights Commissions. Those are international laws. They're not American laws. That is not part of the Supreme Law of the Land, Article 6. So when you talk about Mayor Norton and you're talking about human rights and what the agenda that she's pushing through the Council of Europe, we're talking international law. That is by all accounts, she is following international law and not the United States Constitution, which makes it her points invalid and illegal. Now, you take the Council of Europe, I'll just take that one more step because we'll talk about them for a moment. The Council of Europe partnered up with the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, on human rights. And they believe that they wanted to take the International Council of 1948 and take it one step farther. And they wanted to partner up with the Cairo Declaration of 1992, which means that Islam has rights that are above the United Nations Human Rights Commission of 1948, which states that the 1948 laws did not take in consideration personal issues or religious issues of of Islam, where you could have up to 4 wives, you could beat your wife, you could have certain things to do with inheritance and whatnot. So the Council of Europe, even though they in Rochester, I do know this. I don't know if you can still see me, Wes. Can you?
I just had an interruption from a call.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ron.
So my point I was trying to make is the Council of Europe, which is the only city in Rochester, they partnered up with Islam and the OIC. And the OIC goes by the Cairo Declaration 1992, which basically takes away or limits the human rights of women. So here you've got the Council of Europe, which is in Rochester, and the mayor saying that they support Islam, but then you've got the same ideas that say they support Islam, but then they don't support the United Nations Agenda 20 or the Human Rights Commission because of the way they treat women. So Mayor Norton can't get away from that. How could she say that she supports Islam, then she supports the Council of Europe, but the Council of Europe doesn't even support the Cairo Declaration, which doesn't support women's rights? Explain that to me and how she can get around that. Mayor Norton can't get around that. She runs into a roadblock. She can't support everything and then be basically it's saying, if I support the Council of Europe, I don't support Islam. That's what she's saying. Because you can't say I'm going to bring in an entity of you're not
of the groups that well, they're trying to say you've got human rights, but then we need to have local laws prohibiting child marriage, and we need to have additional laws prohibiting female genital mutilation. All these issues that stack up. How can you say or blasphemy? The blasphemy laws. This ties in locally as well to Attorney General Keith Ellison. How could blasphemy laws only pertain to Islam and not Christianity? And well, Mayor Norton's proclamation against bigotry and hate specifically excluded white people and Asians and
Christians.
So it's okay, just go on, continue on with that nonsense about whatever you want to say about Christianity in terms of blasphemy, but don't you dare say anything against Islam. The ironies abound. I can't wrap my head around it, Ron.
You can't, because here's the one thing that I'm knowing. You can't unwrap confusion. Confusion is what it is. It's confusion. And Mayor Norton she's trying to encompass confusion into your daily life. She's saying that she supports one thing, which then she says, I support Islam, but then I support the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe partnered up with them, but they don't support each other because of women's rights. So you can't say you support one and the other. You also, the confusion is, I support illegal immigrants and their freedoms to come to America. How could I support them and then support the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution of the supremacy law? I can't support one and then the other. Either she is or she isn't. This is absolute. Mayor Norton is a very confusing individual. Or she speaks of both sides of her mouth trying to stay on an even keel. That even keel is going to tip one day, or if it hasn't tipped already, and she's going to have to answer to these. The thing is, she can't answer to either. Either Islam is going to be really upset with her, the Muslims, or she's going to get ousted for disgracing the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution, or she's going to upset the Hispanic population, because the Hispanic population, she's using them as objects of endearment, that she could keep them into a plantation style environment, that you're okay as long as you live on the plantation of Rochester. Well, that's slavery. When you're talking about plantation, or the same word as sanctuary cities, you're talking the same thing. You can't say you're allowed here, but don't leave the premises. You're allowed. It's like inviting a dog into your house and saying, yeah, you're allowed to come in and eat out of the bowl, but don't leave the house. I mean, that's really how she's treating these people. She's treating them like animals, like pets. do our dishes, clean our yards, do our whatever.
Landscaping.
Yeah, housekeeping. I mean, think
Yeah.
about it. The biggest employer of
Housekeeping
illegal
at the
immigrants.
big hotels in Rochester want cheap labor for as housekeepers. Very
Right.
simple to figure out. The restaurants want cheap workers to wash the dishes.
But
The
don't leave the
elites want
plantation.
their food delivered to the door. Mayor Norton calls for food on the phone, and it's whisked up to her home by drivers
Mhm.
and prepared by people she doesn't know. Do we want to live in that kind of world? Is that the kind of world that's preferable? Would we want to be in a society where, like, Mayor Norton stays in her basement, basically, from her bat lair, ordering food, and then it's brought to her doorstep, and she gives a tip? Is this the kind of human relationships that we want to have in a real community? I don't think so. I really don't. Why would anyone want to live like that?
Well, then that's the ultimate question is, I mean, think about it. That's how we started out this conversation. What is the ultimate objection or objective is to bringing in millions of illegals across the board. What would be the reason for that? And my reasoning, my rationale is that this is a hostile takeover. We've seen a coup, and if nobody believes that, we've seen a coup on the American presidency and the Electoral College this past election. What would stop them from pushing in people or third world nations that come over here, control them, and take over our governments and elect them into positions from failed states? What is to stop a failed state idea and agenda to come over here, mass produce, then nation build into a community and take the community over? We're seeing it. I mean, you think about this right in front of my face. Dayton, who was a past governor, said, if you do not like what's happening to Minnesota, you can leave. He said cities like Worthington and Wilmer is the way it's going to be. And those cities have been consumed by third world people. That's what he said. If you don't like it, this is the new agenda. This is what we're pushing for. So we got it right out of his mouth. He said it in St. Cloud, and he said it at St. Ben's at the college. Twice he said this. So we know their objective. We know that they're trying to bring in third world people. We know that they're trying to change the dynamics of our culture. And the problem here's the issue. Here's the rub, Mr. Weston. The rub is that people in Minnesota see this happening and they say nothing. See something, say nothing. They don't. They know for a fact that their friends who are out there have a farm and they're milking 1,000 cows. They know that they're hired illegal aliens, and they do nothing. They say nothing. And who's the one that's benefiting from this? The farmer is benefiting from it. The cheap labor is benefiting from it. But when this labor gets hurt on the farm, where do they go? They go into the hospital, have their hand or their leg fixed, and who pays for that? You and I pay for it. So, and what do they do when they earn this money? They take that money, they send it back home. Do they put it into the streets, the roads, the highways, the police departments? No, they send it back home, where the
But Ron,
dollar is worth twice as much.
furthermore, if we have illegals working here in Minnesota, here in Rochester, they're not paying income taxes. They're not paying property taxes. They're not paying fees and services taxes. You know, those fees and licenses that you pay for every day. If they're not paying any of these, then that's a further drain on the economic system. It's almost as if they don't exist. They're sort of persona non grata. They're individuals who have no legal standing, and as you're mentioning, they have no like sort of insurance claim standing, no insurance standing. You and I are paying for that. God forbid something happens to them as they're working, but they're also not. They have no buy-in. They have no connection to this society. They are being treated as widgets. There's something incredibly, I would say, evil about exploiting human beings as a means to an end. And we're luring people from these third world countries. We're trafficking them. It's human trafficking, bringing them into Minnesota to set them up for work situations where they are not uh, perhaps equipped, but on the other hand, they can't advocate for their own situations. So why would an individual like Mayor Norton pretend to be moral for standing up for their situations? It's not in it. I can't understand it, Ron. Can you sort it out for me in the next couple of minutes? Because
Well,
we're coming up on 30 minutes, and we promised to make this less than
yeah.
30 minutes. But
Wes, you're trying to make confusion ravel itself out in 30 minutes. It's not going to happen. You got a
no,
Unitarian, you got a Unitarian person here. Just that alone should explain, just have its own explanation. She follows on the shirt tail of a guy named Brady, who was a past mayor who considered himself to be conservative, and then brings in the Council of Europe. They also put in they're pushing for the welcoming cities resolutions in Austin. They're pushing for inclusive equity and diversity. All of this comes out of the United Nations. These are directives that are coming outside of the city, and you say this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because we've learned American laws. They're following international laws. Mayor Norton is a treasonous. Article 3, Section 3 of the United States Constitution. She is treasoning the people of the United States and definitely treasoning the people of Rochester. And the Rochester people have no idea. They think of her as a young, viral, whatever lady, and she's innocent, and she puts on this big smile. She lives in a basement like a troll living under a bridge. Nobody ever sees her, until she comes out. You're like, hey, wow, the trolls do live, right? Trolls do live, and so you think, well, maybe we ought to feel compassion for her, but here's the deal.
compassion,
Huh?
nice word. Compassion is such a nice word.
Yeah, it is nice as long as unless you're a white male.
Uh,
Um, I mean, it is. I mean, they're using that. They're teaching white privilege in all these schools, and they're teaching in Loyola College or high schools now. So the point I'm trying to make is, without getting off the rails here, is your city council, along with many others. You've got Wilmer, you've got St. Cloud. The question is why don't the conservatives run for city council? Why is it always 7-1 in a city that's overwhelmingly conservative, like St. Cloud and Wilmer? Overwhelmingly conservative, and they elect overwhelmingly all liberals to run their city. What? That's confusion right there.
yeah,
So that's the thing that you go, I don't understand. These people, they sound good, they throw out a good pitch, and then they throw out all this United Nations welcoming city stuff on you. So don't try to
yeah,
unravel Mayor Norton, because she hangs around with these Hollywood wannabes, the Unitarian people who believe that we're all welcoming. So your city's only getting worse because that border's
yeah.
coming to them. That border's coming to Rochester.
It really is coming. It's here, right? It's coming. And we had Mayor Bloomberg spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to buy candidates to win in Rochester.
Why?
Dropped hundreds of thousands of dollars. This billionaire Bloomberg, who was exactly in one debate on the Democrat side and got nothing for the millions of dollars he spent to do that. And he's spending money against Carla Nelson, who's not my favorite person, and Dave Senjum, who's kind of a warmed over Democrat, come over to the Republican side. But in his Every Cities initiative, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to buy candidates, and it didn't work for him. And so, yeah, we've got a lot of things going on in this Democrat urban plantation of Rochester, Minnesota. And thank you for helping to elucidate some of this intel and make sense of it tonight, Ron. And I really hope we see you here soon, live in person. And I believe there could be some tremendous energy surrounding an event having you here in Rochester. Trevor Loudon was awesome. I don't see any reason why we couldn't have as many people turning out to see you speak in Rochester area as well. Hope to see you soon, Ron.
Well, I
Would you
hope
come
that.
down?
I'd love to come down again, and we'll bring a PowerPoint. We'll explain to you just exactly how the program works, and I won't sugarcoat it. You're living in a racist city of anti-Americanism. You're probably on the top 4 cities in Minnesota. Duluth, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, and the hypocrisy of that city is we love everybody, but we hate our own selves. Because that's true. They just hate themselves. And those Unitarians are probably the leading examples of self-hatred. And I remember a guy who was a therapist once said, he told me, he says, 30% of the people get therapy and 70% need it. And there's your 70 right there. That's the Unitarian Church needs some real therapy. Look in the mirror and see where it's coming from.
Yeah, there's really there's a lot of material there, enough for a conference in terms of the Mayor Norton types with daddy issues who hate themselves and hate their culture and hate the civilization that allowed them to run wild and behave as they do. So yeah, a lot of material there. And Ron,
Right.
should we call it a night?
Yeah, appreciate it. We'll be talking again.
Back at you, Ron. Thank you. And we'll talk to you next time.
Hey, good
Thank
night.
you.
Yeah,
Good night.